What's up, everybody? Alex here. Kind of an impromptu Saturday night video. I'll preface this now. This is going to be a little bit all over the place, but that's okay. I don't really care. We don't do edits here. We don't think about these things too much. But I was sitting here thinking, and I'll say this too, this video will not mean anything to probably 99.9% of you, but maybe to a couple of you, it will. And that's focusing on that for fans of progressive rock, fans of progressive metal, fans of my favorite band, Dream Theater. We had a loss in the Dream Theater family over the last couple days with the passing of Charlie Dominici. Now, I'll say this, that even if you're not a Dream Theater fan or have no idea who they are or don't care to hear any of this, I think this is important because what I'm going to focus on is something that I feel has been important in the Dream Theater world that I wish was more present outside of just that band. And again, this sounds very convoluted, but we'll get there. Even on videos like this, we're drinking. Back at it. Happy Saturday. Cheers, everyone. It's more Founders. Backwoods Bastard. Bourbon barrel aged Scotch ale. It's good. Warms the soul. So, as I said before, this is a video about the passing of Charlie Dominici. Charlie Dominici was not the original vocalist in Dream Theater, progressive metal band that was formed at Berkeley back in the mid to late 80s. He was actually one of the... They went through a lot of singers, but he was not the original vocalist, but he was the vocalist on their debut record. And I think that's why a lot of people say that he was their original vocalist. That debut came out in 1989 on MCA / Mechanic Records. It's called When Dream and Day Unite. This has always sort of been an interesting piece in the Dream Theater catalog. I don't think a lot of people think of it as much. They probably go to like Images and Words as the big debut. Production on this is not great. In fact, I would say that is probably the biggest flaw to this record. I think the songs are there. The playing is there, obviously. But the production is just thin and red. This sounds like a demo. I mean, that's the best way to put it. This sounds like a demo record. And it wasn't promoted. And it wasn't easily accessible. And, it would be several more years until they would release Images and Words, which blew up for them. But this is their debut and has Charlie Dominici on vocals. The quick and dirty of Dream Theater is this was Mike Portnoy, John Myung, and John Petrucci met at the College of Berkeley, or Berkeley College of Music. Met there, teamed up with Kevin Moore, a childhood friend of John Petrucci back in Long Island, and they started Dream Theater. This sort of, what if we melded the musical capabilities of Rush and Yes and all these other great classic progressive rock bands, but with the attitude and heaviness of Metallica and Megadeth, but also the virtuosity of an Alan Holdsworth or some of these just classic players. And they really sort of came together and created what we now know as progressive metal. And you could argue that all the bands that have came afterwards have really sort of modeled their sound after that. Over the years, they've gone through a number of different lineup changes, but what has always sort of meant something to me that for the most part, it's always been really civil. It's always been really, this is for the betterment of where we'd like to go as a band. There has not been a lot of negative ill will. Yes, you could go back to, some of the drama with Mike Portnoy leaving originally 13 years ago and then his return just several weeks ago. But, for the most part, there was always this element of, it's a family. And so, Charlie Dominici, although he was only around for a couple of years and sang on that first proper Dream Theater record, that was something where I remember seeing a documentary where I think it was Mike Portnoy made the reference, and I could be wrong here, so don't quote me on this, but he made the reference that Charlie is an amazing vocalist, an amazing musician, an amazing person, but he just wasn't the fit for the band. And I think he made the correlation that this would be like Steve Walsh from Kansas singing for Iron Maiden. Has nothing to do with the actual singer himself. This just wasn't a great fit. And I think that's a great way to look at this, and a lot of different artists and things that come out over the years is that, it's not like nobody's doing anything wrong. It just might not be the fit, right? And yeah, the idea of Steve Walsh singing for an Iron Maiden doesn't make sense, even though they're both amazingly qualified and great in their own way. But even after that 1989 release, 15 years later, they actually reunited with Charlie in 2004 and released this. This was the When Dream and Day Reunites. This is part of their lost, not forgotten archives. You can still find it for fairly inexpensive, I guess. But this was a live show where they played that debut record in its entirety, and I think it attached a couple other songs, maybe Metropolis and To Live Forever on here. But the class and the camaraderie and the family sort of attitude was always there with that band, and obviously with Charlie. And so I say all that as I was thinking more of it, is I don't think for a lot of Dream Theater fans, Charlie means a lot from us from a standpoint of, oh my gosh, what an impact he had on the band. But I think for a band in the fandom where that sort of family is always such a huge part of it, it did impact us in a different way because of that debut record, because of, this is sort of where it began. Even as quote unquote unsuccessful as it was, you can't argue that that's where it sort of began. And considering the band, and especially Mike Portnoy, kept in contact with him up until just several days or weeks up until he passed, I think is important because there are so many artists and bands out there who, I don't know, it's tough as a fan because you just see sort of a lot of the ill will and a lot of the discontent and a lot of the awful things that are said and felt about other members of the band. And then the fans get into it with, is this person really that important? Did they need to do, all this kind of shit that it's like, Jesus Christ, get over it, people. Like, these people are creating art together, and, personalities get involved, and it could be anything. But I've always appreciated and respected Dream Theater and their approach to how they have worked with past members, whether that be Kevin Moore, who left on his own accord, whether that be Derek Shrinian, who was literally fired from the band, but is still, one of Mike Portnoy, who you could argue was responsible for firing him, still one of his best friends to this day, and they still obviously partner together all the time. The Del Fulvio brothers, as they call themselves, with their work with Sons of Apollo and everything else. And so, it's interesting. I started thinking again of like, this is more than just the singer on their first album passing away and that being very sad. And he was a little bit older than the rest of the band. I think he was in his 70s, while the rest of the band is sort of in their 50s. But, I started thinking about, not only is this important as a Dream Theater fan because of his passing, and that sort of puts this all into perspective for fans of that band, but also because, it's a good reminder of the human element that I wish that more artists and bands kept in mind. You hear it all the time about how, the business and, all these things and the politics and all these things complicate things. And I can't say I get it because I'm not a successful musician, nor am I in a successful band, but I've seen those things, and it's just, I've always appreciated and respected their approach to these things, and how they have sort of navigated those complicated waters in a civil, friendly way, kind of always reminding ourselves that it's about the Dream Theater family. And whether you were someone who recorded one record back in 1989, or whether you were a drummer like Mike Mangini for 13 years, that you are still a member of this Dream Theater family. And I can't help but think that I wish more bands or artists were like that, opposed to, the Motley Crues of the world, who seem to be 95% tabloid and drama and 5% actual music. But you know what? They got their own. That's a different thing. That's a different thing. So, yeah. I did sit here. I think he passed away yesterday, or the news was shared yesterday. It might have been later this week. I did give this a spin tonight. And one of the things that also stood out to me was that in the Dream Theater canon, especially when they play live, they do still pull a number of songs from this record. I'm thinking about what closes it off, Only a Matter of Time. They played that at their Live at Budokan back in 2004, which was a huge live release from them. They play Fortune and Lies still to this day, seemingly every other tour. I remember on their Score DVD or their Score concert when they were celebrating 20 years on the Octavarium tour, one of my favorite songs they played was Afterlife. I thought of course, when they're playing it live now, it's John Petrucci and Jordan Rudess, but that unison sort of solo piece at the time, that would have been Petrucci and Kevin Moore, still just gives me chills all the time. I mean, just amazing virtuosity and the way that they were so in tune with each other, of playing the exact same notes at the exact same time at super high levels. And I just, it's interesting that although for a lot of people this was like the quote unquote forgotten record, as I said before, people still say Images and Words is their first record, and it's not. And so I think for a number of reasons that it's time to give this another listen. Yes, production aside, yes, maybe Charlie's vocals don't fit the band, but his impact and his relevance in the Dream Theater canon and the Dream Theater family is really important to note. And I think as someone who is younger and really got into this band later in their career, this is the first time that somebody of that family has passed. And so it impacts you in a different way, right? It impacts you like one of your favorite musicians passing or one of your favorite artists passing. And so, yeah, again, kind of just a random observation, set of feelings and thoughts about this band and Charlie in general. For all those fans out there, maybe this will catch on to the Dream Theater fan base of people who love talking about this kind of shit. But it's just been interesting to think about over the last couple of days of his impact, as well as that sort of additional point about how the band has always been able to keep that sense of family, keep that sense of camaraderie throughout all the years, regardless of how long somebody was in the band. And how I wish more bands and artists took note of that, and how I wish we kept the human element in music. Maybe that's the big thing, is that, people complain about the business and the politics all the time, but I also say that's because people make it about the business and the politics. Opposed to a lot of these bands, it was just a bunch of people with their best friends making art together and inspiring people and themselves together. And a lot of me wishes we did more of that. So, yeah, there's your random Saturday night kind of tipsy because we've been drinking a little bit in the feeling sort of video. But who cares? I hope everybody is doing well out there and enjoyed the ramble. And I would love, I guess, your thoughts. Not to throw one of these like, oh, what do you think about all this? I mean, yes, obviously, if you're a fan of Dream Theater, you might have some feelings about this. But I also think it's important to really consider, bands, are these business relationships? Is this purely business? Do we make business decisions, and do we just treat people like coworkers, or whatever that is? Or are artists or bands, are they family? Are they friends? Do they treat people like, do they treat each other like their brothers and sisters? Or, again, does it get lost in the whole sort of political business relationship thing that seems to bring down so many people? So, yeah, would love your thoughts on that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. And, hope everybody has a good weekend. And cheers to everybody out there. Take care. Bye.